America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation.
And I'm Alfredo Ortiz, CEO of Job Creators Network.
And you can subscribe to the show at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcast from. So, Alfredo, today we're going to be joined by our very good friend, John Solomon. John's an award-winning investigative journalist, author, and digital media entrepreneur who serves as the CEO and editor-in-chief of Just the News. So that should be very interesting. I know he's been in the middle of a lot of very hot stories and broke a lot of good stories too. So looking forward to that for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And it will be interesting, though, because I know both of us have interviewed with him several times. And so it'll be interesting now with the shoe on the other foot, right? Actually doing the interview.
Talk about role reversal.
Yeah. So no stress here, right?
Hopefully he doesn't judge.
Yeah. And if he does, just keep it to himself, right?
Yeah, of course. Before he comes on, though, I thought we could spend a couple minutes just talking about your new op-ed in Washington Examiner. I love the headline, Biden administration quietly steps up its war on small business. I mean, the rest of the world is on fire. And so quietly, he's got his regulatory state moving right along with the National Labor Relations Board announcing the new joint employer rule. I mean, here we go again, right? Feels like deja vu.
Yeah. In the words of Ronald Reagan, there you go again, Joe.
Exactly. Well, I mean, this is a very detrimental rule that the NLRB has come out with because it's really going to hit an area that we have worked a lot in, and that's the franchising area and independent contractors. You know, just individuals who are individual contractors and freelancers. So anywhere from camera people to consultants, you name it. This additional rule is going to ban many of those freelancing and independent contracting opportunities and impact the franchise system very much so because it'll make the franchisor, so that main company, liable for all of the employment decisions of the franchisee, which really are independent small business people who bought into a system that works, and now they're going to basically report into a corporate entity.
Yeah, this is horrible for the franchise industry. I mean, it quite frankly could really kill the entire industry, which I think is exactly what this administration is looking to do. Because small businesses, as we've always said, are the thorn on the side for Joe and the rest of the Democrats because they represent everything that they hate, right? I mean, free enterprise, capitalism, unlimited success. If you play by the rules and work hard, you can have, basically any opportunity and succeed at any opportunity, really. And they hate that. So they can't control small businesses. So putting them out, out of business, I think is really ultimately their goal here. And boy, I'll tell you, these two rules are going to go a long way to doing that because if you're a franchisor, would you want to take, a chance on a new franchisee, or would you just start awarding new franchises to existing franchisees, right? And so, this was always the big opportunity and entry point for a lot of our minority small business owners is the franchise system. And so if that goes away and these rules really kind of put a kibosh on, these new guys trying to get in, migrants, minorities, right, trying to get into, our American dream. I mean, this is just really truly disastrous for them and for the economy.
Yeah, I mean, this is not our first time dealing with this as well. In
Yeah.
2015, Barack Obama passed when he was president, and Joe Biden was then vice president. Same thing. The NLRB passed a rule on joint employer, and it cost the franchise businesses $33 billion a year in operational costs and 376,000 jobs as a result of that. So there's real concrete measurements as to the detrimental effect that this rule has had on the franchise industry. And Trump came in his administration, and of course pulled it back. And now, it's like a rubber band. I mean, I don't know how businesses are able to even plan when you've got administrations that literally change the playbook for them to actually plan out into the future.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a few interviews that we've done with John Mata from the, the CFA and the Coalition of Franchisee Associations, Chip Rogers from the American Hotel Lodging Association, my interview with Labor Secretary Acosta. They've all said that these two rules, really, quite frankly, are disastrous, for independent contractors and really for the franchise industry. And so, I think we have to do whatever we can to really fight it, just like we did, back under the Obama administration, because again, this is so detrimental, and it's just so nearsighted of the administration, because this is really what helped create the American economy, the franchise industry, and so.
Well, I think that your op-ed really hit it on the head. Is why? Why is the Biden administration doing this when there's clear evidence of its detrimental effects? And I mean, you spell it out very well here in your op-ed. It's because he wants to pay off his prominent plaintiff lawyers and labor union donors
Yeah.
who the president is relying on for his reelection campaign. So it's a big payback
Well,
for those two groups.
yeah, and it makes it a heck of a lot easier to unionize folks in the food industry, right? Which has been very, very difficult for the Democrats to do, to unionize, because you can, right? And so a lot of the food service workers are non-unionized, and this goes a step in the direction of getting them unionized. And of course, once you get them unionized, what does that mean? Union dues, right? And where those union dues go? Well, I think last time I checked, about 90% of union dues go to Democrats. So we know why. Really, truly, the real reason why they're doing this is for getting more votes and getting more money for themselves.
Absolutely. Well, this is the regulatory state, and that fourth branch of government that you talk about in the op-ed rearing its ugly head, and we really need to get Congress acting on the joint employer rule and finalizing it and codifying it, because you can't have one administration come in and do such detrimental damage, and then have another administration come in and fix it, and then another one come in behind it and bring back the same rule. We can't conduct our business and our economy that way and have businesses survive at all. Anyway, I think it's time that we move on and talk to John Solomon. He will be joining us from Just the News. John's executive experience includes helping to build the successful Hill TV video platform as the newspaper's executive vice president, and serving as editor and vice president for content and business development at the Washington Times, where he oversaw the transformation of the company's content, audience, and revenue strategies. John, welcome to Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone.
Yeah, John, thank you very much for coming on, and for being such a friend and supporter of Job Creators Network. It really has meant a lot to us, and we're just so thankful that you've made the time to be with us today.
It's a great honor. I think of all the journalism we've been able to do as a result of Job Creators Network, and the impact you've had in Washington and across the country. I can't think of another more impactful business group that I've covered in the last 10 years than you guys. So it's a great honor to be with you.
Well, thank you, John. And I'll tell you, boy, the stories you have broken in the past few years are just been amazing, especially this year with with Biden and everything going on there. So I know Elaine's going to kick us off with the questions, but again, thanks so much.
Hey, John. So I am always curious to hear what you're working on. I know you've broken, like Alfredo said, some big stories and some big information surrounding the whole Hunter Biden investigation and everything. But I thought we would just kind of see what you got going on, and hopefully you check under your car every day when you put a mirror
Usually because I'm
there.
missing my keys. Actually, I dropped my keys and I can't find them. But yeah, I do occasionally check under the car. So there's a lot going on. And I think there are two really amazing stories to chronicle. One of them is the corruption scandal, the Biden family, which we were told was a conspiracy theory in 2019 when I first started writing about it at The Hill. And today it's no longer a conspiracy theory. It is a really validated fact of a multi-million-dollar enterprise where Hunter Biden and James Biden and family members sold the Biden name to foreigners trying to gain influence in Washington, and they pocketed millions of dollars of it. And it looks like in the case of Hunter Biden that he would disguise some of these, what were basically foreign lobbying fees, as loans and other things, which allowed him to cheat on his taxes, which is ultimately, like Al Capone, how he gets caught, how the IRS and the FBI start looking at Hunter Biden from a criminal perspective. That story keeps growing. And I think the next layer of that story that will break in the next few weeks is when Hunter Biden's foreign honeymoon was over, meaning that the foreign money dried up as a result of Joe Biden running in 2020 and the spotlight had already been put on him by my stories and others. Where did he get his next round of money? And millions more dollars flow into Hunter Biden during the 2020 presidential campaign and since Joe Biden has been in the White House the last 2.5 years, explaining where that money came from, how it was constructed, and why it might be a concern to the American people today as they pick their next president in 2024. I think that's where the next big angle of the story goes, and we'll be breaking some news on that. We just had a big story yesterday about a $250,000 loan from China. I think it's the last sort of known major foreign money to go to Hunter Biden. That occurs in 2019 after Joe Biden announces he's running for president. And 2 years later, that loan, that debt gets wiped away. Well, Hunter Biden walks away from it, and a Hollywood fat cat, a donor lawyer, picks up that loan from Hunter Biden and absolves him of absorbs that debt and absolves Hunter Biden of it. I think we're going to see a whole storyline moving in that direction. The other big story we're covering is the one that, of course, affects your base, and that is the economy. And we haven't seen an economy like this probably in a half century since the Carter years. And every major factor of economic despair is rising in America. I've had two stories in the last month that I don't think mainstream media covered very strongly, but I think they're really important. The first is the largest number of Americans in over a half century slipped into poverty in the second year of the Biden administration. So millions of Americans moved from being out of poverty to in poverty. Trump years took them out of poverty. Biden years brought them back in. And at the same token, story I just broke this past weekend, over 10 million Americans last year moved into the status of hunger. They're food insufficient, the largest number ever recorded in a single year. The Biden economy is having devastating consequences for the very people Joe Biden said he was running to help in 2020. And I think the political fallout from that will be pretty clear in 2024.
But John, I don't understand where you're coming from because, Joe Biden's flying around the country saying how great Bidenomics is, from the middle out and the bottom up.
Yeah. Well, anyone who's seen a Job Creators billboard in Times Square or read any of the data or your monthly survey knows the truth, which is there is a gap between the promise and rhetoric, and even a gap from some of the economic indicators that sometimes look like that we're performing well, and the actual reality of what everyday Americans at the dinner table experience or what they experience in their shops on Main Street. And I think the single biggest cause of this is when you start, as you predicted, Alfredo, I think in a show I did 3 or 4 years ago, when you start throwing the fire of government spending on a burning red hot economy, you create inflationary pressures. Then all of a sudden, Americans can't keep up. Their dollar is worth less and less. That's the first dynamic that Joe Biden created. And then by calling that inflation transitory when it was not going to be transitory. He then created a dynamic where the Fed had to raise interest rates to the point now that most young Americans have been priced out of the housing market because housing prices remained high, but now interest rates are no longer 2 and 3%, they're 7 or 8%. And so the indicators that Job Creators Network puts out every month, all of the survey data that you get from your Main Street business pulse takers, is the real measure of what's going on. People realize they're losing buying power. There's also a labor crunch in this country, begun by the policy of paying people not to work, and then wondering why people stayed out of work when that policy ended, and then compounded by the fact that the baby boomers have left the job market in really large numbers, perhaps a little quicker because of the pandemic. Right. But we've created the perfect firestorm for the economy. And you're right, the rhetoric of Joe Biden does not match the experience of most everyday Americans.
Yeah, and John, if you look at the polls, I mean, the polls are really kind of verifying that. I mean, people are just not stupid. I mean, I think the administration was really counting on the American public to be stupid. But look, they know what they feel like in the grocery store. They know what it feels like at the pumps. You look at the inflation numbers, and they're still touting, hey, it's not that bad. It's only come down to 3%. But it's the price levels, right? I mean, we always like saying it's the actual price levels that really matter when you look how expensive electricity is, energy overall. You look at groceries. I mean, for heaven's sakes, the other day I wanted to go, make myself a turkey sandwich. I went to the deli and it was $15 a pound for turkey. I mean, you can't even make yourself a turkey sandwich anymore. It's just crazy. And so the American public is feeling that. I think that's why now the polls are saying that roughly 75% of Americans polled saying that the country is going the wrong direction. The economy is hurting them, and that they're actually worse off than they were a few years ago.
Yeah, I listen, the dynamic feels a lot like, I can remember I was just about to start high school at the end of the Carter years. And I just remember everybody feeling the same malaise, the same sense that we were weak on the world stage and the economy was eating families alive, high interest rates, high inflation. And it feels a half century later or 40 years later, very similar to that dynamic. And I think it's not one that Joe Biden can now fix between now and election day. He's going to have to own it. And there's another dynamic, which is the very policies Joe Biden is pursuing today, like right this moment, are adding the next potential wage and inflationary pressures on the economy. These war on home appliances are only going to make every time you go to Lowe's and Home Depot more expensive to go shop. And the EV push, combined with the UAW strike, believe me, Ford and GM are not going to eat those costs. The next time you go buy a car, you're going to be paying for those massive pay increases that Ford and GM just agreed to, and the impact of a lopsided electric vehicle market that is subsidized by the government but is not sustainable right now. So there are new inflationary pressures being injected in by Biden policies now that people will feel in 2024 and 2025. That's not good for the president's reelection chances.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think I saw a $40,000 loss per EV vehicle, I think, amongst the big three. I mean, there's no way they're going to be able to sustain that. And so, quite frankly, they're going to have a bailout from the taxpayer, right? I mean, I'm sure it's going to be something like that the administration is going to cook up.
We just had that today. I think it was on Just the News that the wind industry is going to likely need a bailout because it's upside down. And then another big thing, the utopian of liberal policy, California is shutting down solar and wind generation that it paid billions of dollars for because it doesn't have the power lines to transmit it. And again, we put the cart so far in front of the horse in the Biden energy policies that the horse is now smashed into the back of the cart, and you're seeing the fallout from that. Again, we the taxpayers and we the consumer are going to own all that.
Yeah.
Well, John, we certainly appreciate you reporting the truth about the economy, about Hunter Biden, and the corruption that's happened in the administration. But one of the things that we see, and maybe the public doesn't see as much, is the media bias out there and the threat that is to our freedoms. Talk a little bit about that, and you may even be able to contrast it to what was happening in the Carter years, because there are media publications out there touting Bidenomics and how great things is. They're out there tearing apart any of the allegations against Hunter Biden still on the laptop. It's amazing to me. And there's almost zero interest in some publications to even cover the Hunter Biden information at all. And so when you see that kind of discrepancy is against the facts and what's really happening, I mean, what impact does that have on the public when it comes to going to the ballot box, when it comes to understand what's really happening, and where the corruption really lies?
When I first came to Washington in the fall of 1991, I had one of my first interactions when I got to town. I was like a 22-year-old reporter. I bumped into a just retired Wisconsin senator, by the way, a progressive liberal named Bill Proxmire, but he's a guy that cared about taxpayers' dollars. He used to do the Golden Fleece Award to highlight government waste. And he said to me in a little interview in a cubby at the Library of Congress, and I'll never forget that day because he had 8 or 10 truisms that have guided my career as a reporter. It was funny that this wily old politician had so much insight to share with this green behind the ears reporter. But he said to me, there's no greater danger to American democracy and the constitutional republic than a disinformed or misinformed electorate. And that he was very proud that through his career, by doing the Golden Fleece Award, for instance, he could highlight to Americans, and reporters would cover it, that their taxpayers' dollars were often being wasted. He's very proud of that. And he said, as long as I can still do that and the media will cover it, we'll be able to have a grip on some of our government failures. I think if Bill Proxmire were alive today, he'd be really worried that his prediction had come true. Americans went into the 2020 election because of the mainstream news media reporting that the Hunter Biden laptop and all of its corruption allegations were Russian disinformation. 51 U.S. intelligence experts who got their bona fides from the American taxpayer put their bona fides on the line and falsely attested to the fact that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. Now, I'm a reporter, I've been around a long time. On October 24th of 2020, I was able to confirm that the laptop was authentic. I was able to learn from FBI sources and from the Director of National Intelligence, who gave his statement to me on the record that the laptop was real and not disinformation. That means the Washington Post, the New York Times, all the truth watchers, and I put those in air quotes these days,
Right.
Could have done the same thing I did. They chose not to. And I think that Senator Proxmire's warning 40, 30 years ago when I came to town is perhaps more prescient than ever. We have a media that's in bed with an espionage industrial complex, a spying complex, and a government administrative state, and they're all working together to tip the scale away from Americans' knowledge and toward a preferred outcome, a preferred narrative. And our constitutional republic is in grave danger if Americans can't get the truth. If the United States government, if a guy named Elvis Chan at the FBI can go to social media and say, we don't want that opinion out there, that's not our preferred opinion, please censor that, and it happens, the very fundamental basis of free speech is at jeopardy, and that did happen. The courts have ascertained that that is happening. What is the solution? I think the solution is not unlike what Job Creators Network did for Main Street America 7, 8, 10 years ago. It was clear that a lot of businesses on Main Street America were no longer being represented or having their interests represented by the groups that used to do it. And you stepped into the void and you created competition in a free marketplace of ideas and in a free business enterprise. And you created a competition that ultimately beat the competition and became the preeminent voice for small business in America. The same thing has to happen in the news media today. Just the News is one of many new nascent news organizations that are going out there trying to do journalism the way it used to do, which is without favor, just report the truth, trust the American people to make up their own mind based on the facts. And we're beginning to have an impact. How do I know we're having an impact? Well, Just the News and this little ecosystem of news sites were the ones who found the IRS whistleblowers. We learned about them. They were hidden. In fact, Republicans in Congress had turned them away. They actually turned the whistleblowers away the first time. We brought them to light, and we worked with the mainstream news organization, CBS News, and we got the mainstream media to cover that. And the arc and the narrative of the Hunter Biden case began to change. The American people are now getting drips and drabs of it, not as much as they should, but they're getting more of it. I think you'll see that happen again in the next couple of weeks. That's the key: competition, and then those competitors bringing the mainstream media over through competition. I think that's going to be our long-term solution to getting back to an informed electorate.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be, right, John? Because when you add up all the media points out there in terms of the outlets, you have social media, you have the print, radio, TV. I mean, in reality, the conservative voices, at best, I would say, represent maybe 8 to 10% of the total share of voice out there,
Yeah,
right? Because they truly own the space, and so
they do.
we have to figure out how to do it better, just like you're doing with Just the News. But we have to be able to figure out how to break that. I mean, whether it's, unfortunately, I know it's, Chinese owned and all that, but, TikTok media, I mean,
Yeah,
we're not anywhere around there. We're in social media. We're very, very light from that
yep,
perspective relative to the other side. And so, we have to do it better. We have to do it smarter because we're never going to outspend them. I mean, we know that
yeah,
we just will never outspend them. I mean, these guys have blank checks. If you look at Soros, I mean,
yeah.
Zuckerberg. I mean, these guys are truly just blank check donors to the leftist media, and so we just have to outsmart them with better reporting, like you're doing.
Yeah, listen, it's those voices that you mentioned, people like George Soros that were funding the anti-Israel sentiments that I think gave
Right.
rise to anti-Semitism. They're the ones who funded the Truth Watchers that canceled accurate stories. But I do see a moment. I think what the Foundation for Freedom Online is doing, and what Elon Musk is doing with them to
Right.
highlight censorship that was literally insane. That's starting to have an impact. And the fact that the Washington Post corrected 13 to 15 stories about Russiagate 6 years later, that's an impact. 2 weeks ago, the fact checker, Glenn Kessler, at the Washington Post, who repeatedly said there was no basis to think that Joe Biden had changed U.S. policy when he fired the Ukrainian prosecutor who was investigating his son, came back and said, "Oh, I just looked at all these documents John Solomon and Just the News got, and do-over, Joe Biden
Right.
did change policy." And those
Right.
moments, they're small, right? In the big narrative, they're small, but there's a sign that maybe the mainstream media is feeling pressure from this new a rise of news sites that are reporting truth. And we just got to keep at it. We got to keep at it the same way Job Creators Network kept at advocating and protecting the interest of Main Street America.
Yeah.
What is the big tech role here? Because we saw so much suppression of conservative voices. Our organization, we were blocked on YouTube for a certain period of time, or sorry, Twitter, because of a YouTube video that we posted,
Yeah.
and we didn't make the video. We used old news clips and put a video together using news clips that were in the public domain already, and Twitter blocked it.
Yeah.
And so, we saw so much of that during the pandemic, and it seemed to be tilted towards conservative voices or voices that obviously had a different point of view on the pandemic or on the vaccines, or how to be safe. Any of that was just suppressed. So it's like we have the trifecta of suppression, from the Democrats to big tech, to the mainstream media, that is
Yeah.
suppressing any kind of dissension at all. And I'll give you one more example before I let you respond. RFK Jr., who's running
Sure.
for president, had to change. He was challenging the president, and he changed to independent. And one of the things I've heard him say is that he can't get any air from any of the mainstream media. It's not that they cover him negatively, they simply don't cover him. And so
Yeah.
the Democratic Party didn't even know, many Democrats didn't even know he was running as a result of that. The only where he's getting air is on Fox News and
Yep.
doing podcasts. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, listen, censorship is a major problem. And as censorship is in some ways taking a ding right now, because you got the historic Missouri v. Biden case, which, by the way, is based on a lot of reporting that I and others around me did at Just the News on how government agencies worked with big tech and private university think tanks, if I can call them that, to advocate for censorship in 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. As the courts have now called bunk on that, saying, hey, that's unconstitutional. There's now an order that tells Biden agencies they can't talk to the social media if they're going to talk about censoring a political opinion of an American. While that system is starting to shake and vibrate and maybe break apart when it gets to the Supreme Court, a new form of censorship has begun to take its place. And that is, all right, we won't be able to block you reporting it, but what we will do is we will go to your advertisers and we will tell them, oh, you don't want to advertise with so-and-so because they're a conspiracy theorist or they believe this. And a lot of times they tell the advertiser that information is false when in fact it is very true. And so you have this whole new ecosystem that the left has put together, places like NewsGuard, like Check Your Ads. And these are entities that spend day and night going out trying to cancel the revenue stream because their first effort to just get the gatekeepers to suffocate you, well, that's now getting challenged legally in the courts. And so now what they want to do is, okay, we won't suffocate your opinion, we'll suffocate your financial underpinnings and we'll kill you that way. And they're tortuously interfering in the business of free speech enterprises. And that's going to be the next great threat. It's going to be censorship through attacking the business model as a way of, in advertising, of course, the primary business model, that you're going to see this happen. And so we're in, just when conservatives felt like, well, we got a couple wins. We got Missouri v. Biden. We got a stay against any government contact with big tech media. The answer is, well, the left already moved on. They're already now attacking your dollars, and billions of ad dollars are being scared away from those news sites that dare to question the convention on vaccines and vaccine mandates, and or Hunter Biden, or many other narratives that are not the preferred narratives of the administrative state and the elitists who run media institutions. So this fight and censorship is evolving, and so it's an attack on your ability to publish. If you get over that, they attack your financial streams. And then if you get through both of those, the last one is the one that Robert F. Kennedy's facing, which is we'll just plain ignore you. You may make incredible news. You may prove the world is flat. We were not going to cover you. And that ignorance and isolation is the third form of censorship. We've got to tackle it on all three fronts in order to preserve the First Amendment.
Yeah, it's really amazing. So John, I want to switch gears a little bit to kind of the lawless nature of this administration. As you know, we went to the Supreme Court. We challenged the Department of Education on the student loan bailout. We successfully blocked $400+ billion of being distributed. But now he's basically, even though Congress voted against it, even though the Supreme Court rejected it and told him he couldn't do it, they're doing it. They've already, I think, distributed out another $100+ billion by doing workarounds, both Congress and the Supreme Court. I mean, how do we stop a lawless administration like this?
It's a great question. I think ultimately the jury that will stop them is the American electorate, right? You'll fire a president who has assumed king-like powers and ignores the Supreme Court. And when he doesn't ignore the Supreme Court, has his attack dogs try to question its legitimacy or stack the court, all these different things that Democrats talk about to reduce institutional trust, Americans' trust in the institution of a Supreme Court, which, by the way, has served this country so brilliantly for 248 years. I think the election is the ultimate jury. And so, and it's exactly, I think, how the Founding Fathers intended it. But right now, you have a president that doesn't recognize the will of Congress, doesn't comply with subpoenas or information requests for oversight, and tries to delegitimize or work around very clear and unmistakable rulings and continue to regulate or change or make law in the absence of legislation authorizing him to do it. There is no better example of this. You mentioned student loan one. That is so important. But there's a landmark case from 2 years ago, West Virginia versus the EPA, which is clear. There's not any doubt about what it says. If Congress didn't authorize it, you can't make it up as president. And since that ruling, the Biden administration has literally issued hundreds of new regulations with no legislative authority. They're going to continue to do it until the American people tell Joe Biden and the Democratic Party, we fire you. We've had enough of it. And the way we feel in the economic pocketbook right now, maybe that firing comes in 2024.
Yeah, the administrative state, quite frankly, has never been louder than it is under this administration. I mean, I thought it was bad under Obama, but boy, I mean, it makes Obama look like a loving, Democrat loving American.
Yeah, a moderate
A
regulator.
democracy
Yeah,
loving American. It's
yeah.
just sad. I mean, so 24. You mentioned the 24 election, John. Obviously, around the corner, already starting.
Yeah.
Some good debates. How do you see that coming down, John?
If you had to pick today and you read the polls today, you say it's Trump v. Biden, the redo, right? And I think that may very well be where we end up. But there have been many times where in October of the election year, we thought that Hillary Clinton was going to be the nominee. It was Barack Obama. We thought it was going to be John McCain. It turned out to be George W. Bush. Things could change. There's some movement in the polls. It looks like Nikki Haley is the rising candidate in the Republican primary, but she's still 30 to 50 points behind
Right.
President Trump right now. And so it's very possible that Trump, because of his national organization, could get the nomination in spite of the fact that he's been indicted not once, not twice, not three times, but four times, and sued twice in major cases. And he's going to spend a lot of the election year in the courtroom. But in that statement, if that happens, if the American people say we're going to run Trump again, we're going to pick him as a nominee, there is going to be an implicit message to all those who brought the court cases, all of those who have tried to stop him, that the American people have decided they're going to be the great decider here. And again, I think that's what our founding fathers intended. On the other side, you couldn't have an incumbent president with lower numbers. Literally, historically, there is no one that's been as low as Joe Biden this long and as consistently.
Yeah.
But I think he'll be the nominee unless a health issue arises or unless he chooses to step aside. Dean Phillips is going to throw his hat in, but I don't think he can compete with President Biden right now. So Biden looks like he'll be the nominee as well. And we'll have a redo of the 2020 election, this time, hopefully without a pandemic and with a little bit different rules, like the rules that are now in Georgia that didn't exist in 2020. And it reminds me of another moment in that cancel culture, because I think my favorite news billboard of all time was the one you posted when MLB pulled out of the Atlanta All-Star games because they were certain that new Georgia voting election integrity law was illegal. Well, since that time, and the only people that got punished, by the way, are the black citizens and businesses of Atlanta, a majority black city. What has happened? An Obama judge and another judge consistently have ruled that law was totally proper. There was no discrimination at all. Yet an entire All-Star game was canceled for no good reason. But that law is in place in Georgia. If Glenn Youngkin wins the legislature in Virginia, as he may very well, he's doing well in trying to run that campaign right now. You could have new election laws in Virginia. It could be a slightly different electoral strategy. And I think the other big game changer, this will be the decider. If Republicans muster an early voting effort like Democrats have since 2018, they'll probably overcome the totals that they've lost the last couple of years or underperformed on. If they don't, the Democrats will continue to muster what I call the couch potato vote, the vote that never will go on election day, but if you make it easy, they'll vote from the confines of their home. They'll win another election relying on that. But right now, there are strong signs that Republicans are going to muster a true early vote campaign. It's happening in Virginia right now.
Yeah.
The percentages of advantage that Democrats have on early voting have dropped significantly in this off-year election, and that could be a harbinger of what Republicans might be able to muster in 2024.
Yeah, what's going on in Virginia is pretty interesting. I know that I think Youngkin needs to flip 4 out of the 5 Senate seats, I believe, to flip the Senate there.
Yep.
And that will be a game changer in Virginia and for him, I think. And I know the early vote is so important there and is really working. And I do hope the Republicans really wake up and adopt and embrace this idea of early voting because, look, I mean, as you know, John, we kind of lose the election before Election Day.
Yeah, that's right. You can't start every statewide race 100 to 250,000 votes behind. You just can't make up that gap of votes in a 10 to 15 hour voting day, particularly if something like ballot printers misperform like they did in Maricopa County. And so I think Democrats figured that out long ago, and they've been executing since the 2016 election, this what they call couch potato strategy. Republicans are just starting to get to it. If you look at the early examples, Youngkin will be the latest test. Does he win the legislature or come close to winning the legislature? That will prove again. But Ron Johnson won in Wisconsin when Tim Michael, identical candidates, endorsed by Trump, identical policies. They both faced the same anti-abortion ads. Johnson got 40, 50,000 more votes than Tim Michael. What's the difference between the two? Ron Johnson ran an early voting campaign. Tim Michael didn't. You look at what happened in New York, where the Republicans almost run the governorship in a 20-plus Democrat state and swept 4 unexpected House races. That was an early voting machinery that was built by Lee Zeldin. So there are some early experiments that say Republicans will overperform if they get into early voting. We'll see if those lessons translate into action in 2024.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank you also for sharing your insights on the election. I think our listeners will be very interested in that. And can you tell us a little bit about where our audience can find you and Just the News?
Absolutely. The easiest place is justthenews.com. That's the URL where we put all of our news. We have an app on the iPhone and Android stores. You can always download that. On social media, I'm Jay Salem Reports on every platform that there is, from Telegram to Twitter and everywhere in between, Truth and all the other places that are growing in alternative markets. And then we have a TV show now, which I'm really proud of, on Real America's Voice, called Just the News, No Noise. You guys show up regularly there. We're really proud of that. And a podcast called John Solomon Reports. That's on all the platforms. Those are all the coordinates.
So you're not busy at all.
Not at all. No, it's a regular day in Mayville.
Well, I also want to thank you for being on the front lines. You are a great American. It cannot be easy to do what you do. And I know I joke about looking under your car before you started every morning, but it is true. People do get attacked when they're uncovering the truth and shining light where light has not shown before. So I think you're a great American, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you. And thank you for you guys. You have the same model you're doing in business, what we're trying to do in news. And it's an amazing thing. You have made Main Street a much more vibrant community from your great work over the last decade. So we have a lot to learn from you guys, for sure.
Well, thanks again. And for those of you listening, you can subscribe to the show at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcast from.